Should just come up in a second.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. I'm Councillor Stewart and will be chairing the first review. I'll then leave the meeting and hand over to Councillor Bolton, who will chair the second review. And all members switch on their camera but mute the microphone when not speaking. Officers should have their camera and microphone switched off unless invited to speak. I will now introduce the clerk to undertake the roll call of the members participating today and for all members to confirm their attendance once their names have been announced, so it's clear in the recording of the meeting. As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the room or meeting during consideration of the review. Mrs. Payne?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. So if you can just indicate for the recording that you're present. So Councillor Stewart?
Present.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Present.
And Councillor Reynolds?
Present.
Okay, so we've got all 3 members, so we can now proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. So this meeting has been convened in response to 2 requests for review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. I will now ask Mrs. McBain, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed in the conduct of these reviews. Mrs. McBain?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, I feel it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replaced that with the local review body, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by the Scottish Government's Chief Planner in 2011 stated that reviews by local review bodies should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McBain. I'm happy to proceed. Members, are you happy to proceed? Okay, nodding. Thank you from both councillors. So turning to the consideration of the first review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the erection of a single-storey extension to front at March Bank, 11 Marchbank Road, planning reference number 201620/DPP. We will now hear from planning advisor in attendance, Mrs. Lucy Green, who provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would point out, as obviously I know that you know, that Mrs. Green, who attends today's meeting, is to provide us with necessary professional planning guidance because she's not been involved with the earlier consideration of the planning application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any views on the merits of the proposed development, and in her effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. I know, members, that you know all this information, but as this is each application is different, so it's important that we clarify that for the recording and for those that will be hearing it later. So, Ms. Green, can I please turn to you to describe the application in context, please.
Yes, thank you. I will just share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. This is a review into the application, the refusal of the application for the erection of the single-storey extension to the front at 11 Marchbank Road, Fieldside. The application to the LRB was received within time and in the correct form, and the drawings submitted are now consistent with each other. In addition to submission of the supporting statement, the applicant's agent in the application for review has identified a site visit as being needed to fully appreciate the nature of the site, as it doesn't front onto a public road, and members may consider how familiar they are with the site and area. I'll just describe the nature of the application. So the site is located on Marchbank Road, where the plots of houses on the south side abut the Deeside Way, just down at the bottom. And houses in this area are detached with relatively long plots. This is the aerial view of the house, which is this one here. It's a 1.5-storey granite built with a gable-fronted elevation facing south, and there's an existing small conservatory on the front of the building, which you can only faintly see there. And it's just to the side of the gable. The aerial photo is from our GIS system and shows the trees along the Deeside Way. So this is location plan. Deeside Way is to the south here. And the proposals for a single-storey extension on the south side of the house, which is designed as the main elevation. It extends 4.7 metres forward of the house frontage and is 5.5 metres wide. This is a photograph showing the south front elevation of the house with the existing conservatory porch. And then a photograph taken from the front of the house looking down towards the Deeside Way. Sorry. These are the existing elevations showing the conservatory that would be removed, just dashed in red here. And then a plan as existing showing this is the existing conservatory and the existing front of the house. And this is the plan showing the proposed extension, which contains a bathroom and conservatory with folding doors to the side, just here, opening onto decking. And then there's a window to the front with timber cladding to the side. There's the elevation. And that's the side elevation to the east and to the west. And the existing north elevation with where you would just see the back of the proposed extension here at the side. And a 3-dimensional image there. That's the roof plan. And some photographs that's looking, well, the front of the application house would be here to the side, so it's looking back up the garden and towards the neighbour. And looking to the other side, we just see the edge of number 9. So the reason for refusal, which I'm not going to read, it can be summarised as firstly, the proposal would not be architecturally compatible due to its projection forward, covering the principal gable and roof pitches, and would detract from the character and appearance of the house. Secondly, is how it relates to the surrounding area and the historic pattern of development. And the reason states that an undesirable precedent could be set for extensions to the front of these properties. And thirdly, it states that the proposal would be contrary to policies D1 on design, H1 on residential areas and the Householder Development Guide, as well as similar policies in the 2020 LDP. So I'll just summarise the applicant's case for review. First of all, they point out that the site's not within a conservation area, that the property has two frontages in their view, with a particular relationship to the Deeside Way, which is not particularly publicly visible, and that hasn't been taken into account. They state that policies do not require extensions to replicate the host policy, that policy D1 requires high quality design and materials, whilst the existing extensions are of low quality and do not complement each other. They point out that the property is largely hidden from public view from the Deeside Way, that the existing extension partially covers the south elevation, as does the proposed. And they assert that the design would detract from the dwelling, and that's a subjective point of view in the reason for refusal. They point out that a variety of styles and a graduated building line exists amongst the other houses along Marchbank Road, and that they state a precedent would not be created as each proposal is judged on its merits, and this is barely visible. And there were no comments from consultees, including the Community Council, and there were no objections. So I'll now break off for members to decide whether they feel there's sufficient information for a decision to be made without further procedure.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. And members, are you happy enough with the information that we have in front of us to make a decision pertaining to this application? So I see both councillors nodding yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I too am in agreement. So happy to proceed. Right. So I think actually, just for the recording, I'll just say that Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Henrickson have both agreed that they have sufficient information to proceed, as do I. So Ms. Green, would you like to look at the relevant policies and considerations for this review?
Yes.
That's the correct next step we're on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm using both my screens, that's why I'm turning. So.
Okay. So first of all, the site's zoned within an area that's covered by policy H1 residential areas. So the matters for consideration under that policy are, is this overdevelopment? Secondly, would it have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the area? Would it result in the loss of open space? And does it comply with supplementary guidance? And that, in this case, that would be the Householder Development Guide. So turning to the Householder Development Guide, there is general policies in that. And the first one of these is whether the proposed extension would be architecturally compatible with the original house and the surrounding area. So in terms of that, you would be looking at how it relates to the features on the rear of the existing house, how it sits on the front of the house, and then at the building line of surrounding houses. Would it dominate or overwhelm the original house? is there an adverse impact on privacy, daylight and amenity? Taking into account that any approvals that predate the guidance would not be a precedent. Looking at the footprint of the house and whether it covers more than 50% of the rear or front or rear curtilage. Obviously, those two last points don't apply in this case. So turning to the specific guidance for front extensions on houses, it states that these would only be acceptable where they would not have a negative impact on character and amenity of the house itself and the surrounding area. That established building lines should be respected, that the extension should be compatible with the original dwelling, and that modest porches, which are what's highlighted as appropriate as front extensions, they should not incorporate additional rooms, and that they should incorporate substantial proportion of glazing. Policy D1 relates to design, and it really considers high quality of design and how the proposal would relate to the existing building in terms of how the extension would sit on the building, its siting, etc. So points for consideration in determining the review. First of all, the zoning policy. Does the proposal comply with the tests set out in policy H1? So those would really be the two on the character and amenity of the surrounding area. In terms of design, the siting on the building, and then in terms of front extensions, the proposal involves an extension on the principal elevation of the house, which is not generally accepted by the Householder Development Guide. So do members consider that there is anything specific to the context here which would mitigate the adverse impact on character or visual amenity? And the final two questions to ask: does the proposal comply with the development plan, and are there any material considerations that outweigh the development plan in this instance? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So we're now, members, we can obviously discuss the application in itself. Do you have any questions for Ms. Green? Councillor Hendrickson, I see your hand up, I think.
Yes. So let's see. Yes, it's this issue about no more than 50% of the front curtilage, front or rear curtilage may be covered. I'm just seeking clarification there. Is that of the existing curtilage, or does it include the new extension as well? Because when I'm looking at the, if you, I find the right page. If you look at the dimensions on page 15, the width of the new extension is 5378, which leaves a remainder of 3815. So and I'm trying to figure out the width of the original building, which is something like, must be like something like 6. Looking at the widths of the lounge and the sitting room, must be about 3700 as an estimate. So the 538 of the new thing would be over twice the width of the existing building. Am I correct in that, or is it or yeah?
That policy is looking at the curtilage, meaning the area of the whole plot. So would it cover more than 50% of the front curtilage, which would be the whole sort of site area, rather than in relation to just the house footprint?
Right.
So it wouldn't be, yeah, it wouldn't be close to covering 50% of the front or rear curtilage. Does
I shall remember that in the future.
Does that answer?
Yes, it does. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Just on the materials being used, it talks about the dark grey metal sheet. Can you tell us a little bit about this? This is the first time I've come across metal being used as a fascia. You know, usually it's the plastics and the wood, etc. So this is a new one for me. Could you elaborate on that for me?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that we've seen before on sort of more contemporary type extensions or new buildings. It would, I mean, we obviously haven't got the full details of the material, but it would be, I mean, it looks like a smooth kind of sheeting that would cover the front of the fascia there and the sides of the extension. We could find out the precise details of the colour and finish. If the application were approved, that could be conditioned. Okay. But it is something we've seen before on contemporary type extensions.
And this type of extension on a traditional granite house is normal nowadays, or?
I mean, that wasn't part of the reason for refusal.
No,
it's something that we have approved elsewhere. You know, a contemporary style on a traditional house. The policy doesn't require that they would have to replicate the style of the house itself. It could be complementary by being a contrast.
Okay, that's fine. It was, as I say, it was just a general question rather than questioning the refusal or the approval on this basis. Thank you.
I myself, Councillor Reynolds, would be aware that in the wider West End, there are a number of properties that have aluminium or what appears to be zinc extensions, and obviously almost a complete new build as well. So I've seen it quite a bit actually. Members, do you have any other questions or any other considerations about this application?
No, I haven't.
Councillor Henriksson?
Sorry, no, I was looking at the plans. No, I haven't anymore.
Okay. Do you feel that you've got to a point where you can make a determination on this application?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's true. I too feel that I'm at a stage, having read the report, got to this stage that I can make a decision about the application. So I would actually be stating that I would actually be upholding the planning application from the applicant. I would state my reasons in later, but can I have your view, Councillor Reynolds?
Yes, I'm of the same view as yourself, Convener, and this has nothing to do with my previous question asking about the materials, etc.
Okay. Councillor Henriksson?
Yes, I'm in agreement with you, Convener. The reason I asked about the width of it was just a query because I wasn't. Yeah, that's fine.
No, that's absolutely fine, Councillor Henriksson. I think it's good governance to question things, so we know in our own mind we're making a determination that we're quite clear what we're doing. So in terms of my reasons for approving the application, firstly, I would note that there has been no objections. I also note that, as the applicant states, it's not in the conservation area. Having looked at the drawings and familiar with the area, I believe it's not an overdevelopment of the area. I don't think it's going to have a negative impact on the area or open space. I would also note that what the applicant says is that it's not actually going to be seen and will have very little visual impact on the local area by those walking by, and that the garden is slightly dipped so that you wouldn't see the full impact of the development. Is there anything else that I would need to say in terms of reasons for approving Ms. Green?
Well, there would be the matter of whether you wish there to be any conditions on the application.
Yes, I was just coming to that bit. Sorry, I meant in terms of the reasons for approving. Given that we're aware of other applications that would use that form of material, do you think it would be prudent to put a condition on that, or do you think we can just accept it?
We could put a condition on that just asked for the specification of the materials. That, yeah, I would recommend that you did that.
Okay, so I'm happy to do that, and trust the other members are too. What I would say, you know, on reflection of reading the report, although the determination was refusal in the report, I got the feeling, the way it was written, is that it was almost hard to justify a refusal, because there was many sections for myself, and I would highlight particularly on page 34, that it's saying it's not for this reason, intensity of use, it's not about the over percent, it's not about the contemporary design. And on one side it says about a precedent being set, but yet we also know that each one is on its own merit. I'm just highlighting those points. So happy to approve the application with the conditions you set in the screen of checking the specifications of the materials.
Could Councillor Reynolds, sorry to interrupt, if Councillor Reynolds and Hendrickson could just give a little reason for theirs as well with the policies.
Okay, I think Councillor Stewart has covered everything that I would have covered anyway. So I'm quite happy to agree with all the points that she's raised, particularly as far as the type of material being used, because as a lay person, it was a new one for me, and I think for the officers to get clarification on that, I think is important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'd have to agree with Councillor Stewart and Reynolds on this. I think it's not overdevelopment as such, and I'm more excuse me, I'm more than happy for it to be approved. I agree with both Councillor Reynolds and Stewart.
Okay. So for the recording, will I just quickly run through what we've agreed?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so the application will be approved with a condition that will be on specification on materials. And all members are happy to approve that.
Happy to approve.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just for the recording, I will be now leaving the meeting and handing over to Councillor Bolton. Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Henrickson, and to the clerks. Thank you very much, and to Ms. Green. Thank you. Bye now.
You, bye.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart.
Hello, Councillor Bolton.
I'm just inviting in Gavin, 2 seconds.
Okay. Hi, John. Hi, Dale.
Good morning, Mary.
Morning.
I know I look slightly ghostly, like I think it's a reflection from the window, so hopefully you can see me enough.
Hi, Gavin.
Hi, Gavin. Okay.
You're on mute, Gavin.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute there. Morning, everyone.
Okay. Morning, folks. Okay, we'll just move on. So now turning to consideration of the second review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the formation of the timber decking with external steps to the rear, which is retrospective, planning reference 201317. We will now hear from the planning advisor, Mr. Gavin Evans, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would point out again that Mr. Evans attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because he's not been involved in the earlier consideration of this application under review. Mr. Evans will not, however, be asked to express any views on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect, his role will be neutral, one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. And if I can hand over to you, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, convener. Just be a second while the presentation loads up.
Okay, it's there. You're fine.
Perfect. Thank you. So yes, as you said, before us today, we have a request for review against an application that was refused under delegated powers for detailed planning permission for the formation of timber decking with external steps to the rear. And it's a retrospective application, meaning that the works have been carried out already. The application concerns 27 Birkhall Place in Aberdeen, and the review was found to have been submitted with all necessary information and within the time limit of 3 months following the appointed officer's decision. No new matters have been raised in making this review, and the applicants have requested in this case that further procedure is undertaken by way of a site inspection by members. The purpose of that being to see the context of the surrounding gardens and the neighbouring properties decking. We'll come back to that question in a moment. So just in terms of the site location, a brief description, the application cites a residential plot which is located on the northern side of Birkhall Place in Maastricht and comprises a 2-storey mid-terrace dwelling with associated front and rear garden ground. This application specifically concerns the rear garden and the works that have been undertaken there without first obtaining planning permission. The rear gardens of this row of properties sit lower than the internal ground level of the house. I'll flick through to some photographs that maybe better match with what I'm saying here. So that's just an aerial photo. You can see of note there is the way in which the gardens of these properties sort of taper to the rear. So the relationship between these as they all converge is sort of central to the appointed officer's consideration here. So yeah, these photos have very helpfully been provided by the applicant, give an indication of the decking that we're looking at. So as I was saying, the rear gardens of this row of properties sit lower than the internal ground floor level of the houses, such that there are ordinarily steps down from the back door to the level of the garden. The rear garden now comprises an area of elevated timber decking, which matches the internal floor level, but sits approximately 1.6 metres above the ground level of the garden. This area of elevated decking projects approximately 3.5 metres from the rear face of the house and occupies almost the full width of the plot. You can just see on the right hand side of this image here, not sure if you can see my cursor there, but there's a slight offset of 0.6 metres or 60 centimetres off the boundary with number 25. This elevated section of deck is enclosed by an additional 93 centimetres of fence or upstand, which is just, you can see on the right hand side of the image and again on the far left. Over and above the 1.6 metre high fence, which runs along the boundaries to either side of the garden at its sort of usual level. So from that elevated section of decking, steps lead down just from the sort of central part of the deck to an area of artificial grass, which sits approximately 43 centimetres above the historic ground level.
To interrupt, I'm very sorry to interrupt. It's Lisa Christie here. I don't know if it's just on my computer, but I just can't see that Councillor Reynolds has his camera on. Can we just make sure that Councillor Reynolds has his camera on, please? There we are. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Thanks. So sorry, I think I was just talking about the steps coming down, and the area of artificial grass, that's right, sits approximately 43 centimetres above the historic ground level, with a path formed in decking boards centrally there, and that leads to further steps down to a summer house at ground level. So you can just see that. So there's the steps down at the left-hand side of the image, decking boards leading across the artificial grass, and then a couple more steps down to the level of this summer house here on the right-hand side of the image. Worth noting that the summer house itself doesn't require permission, nor does the area of artificial grass. So those are within the scope of permitted development and aren't within the scope of the application that members are reviewing today. It's really just the elevated section and the steps on the left-hand side there. The officer's report notes that this row of properties sits at right angles to those fronting Cairnwell Drive and Upper Maastricht Way. If I just scroll back, you can see what I'm referring to there. It's just that there's a long row of rear gardens, which this property's rear garden sort of faces towards. Just go back to the photos here and give you an indication of that relationship. So for this one taken from the elevated level of deck, you can see the extent to which views are possible out over the surrounding gardens. Then that's just from the bottom of the garden. On the right hand side of this image, you'll see that there is existing decking to the neighbouring property here. The planning authority has no record of planning permission being obtained or sought for that. It's worth noting that if that has been there for more than 4 years, it would now be immune or exempt from enforcement action being taken. So turning to the proposal, I can come back to any of these photos later on should you wish. So planning permission is being sought retrospectively for the construction of the raised area of timber decking, which is approximately 3.5 metres deep by 5.8 metres wide, for a total of roughly 20 square metres. The associated steps and the additional fencing of just under 1 metre that's been added. So to be entirely clear, the lower section of the deck and the artificial grass and the summer house don't need planning permission, and we're not looking at those today. This is just a sort of zoomed in view showing the sort of various components of the garden, which I think we've probably seen quite well from the photographs already. So as I mentioned before, it's really just the timber deck and the stairs down that are within the scope of what consent's required for. This is a useful section that just shows you how that works in terms of the levels and the relationship with the adjoining screens and fences and things. The appointed officer's reasons for refusal stated in full in the decision notice within the agenda pack, but picks up on the following main points. Firstly, the proposal would have far-ranging impacts on the private amenity of both immediately adjoining properties at 25 and 29 Birkhall Place, and also other neighbouring properties at numbers 31 Birkhall Place, 74 Upper Maastricht Way, and 165 and 167 Cairnwell Drive. And those are basically just the closest properties that are most likely to be affected by any overlooking. And that impact is characterised as being due to the height of the decking relative to neighbouring gardens and their associated fences. Refers also to the impact on number 25 Birkhall Place specifically in terms of the rear garden and its living room window due to loss of privacy and increased overlooking. Similar but less severe impacts are identified to 165 and 167 Cairnwell Drive. On balance then, the officer concluded that the application would be contrary to policies H1, residential areas, and D1, quality placemaking by design of the local development plan, as well as the relevant general principles and guidance on decking set out in the Householder Development Guide, supplementary guidance. It was considered there would be a similar level of conflict with the equivalent policies of the emerging proposed local development plan, and the officer concluded that there were no overriding material considerations in favour of the proposal that would outweigh that policy conflict. So turning then to the applicant's case, notice of review makes reference to the following points in support of the applicant's case. Firstly, the decking in the rear garden was upgraded as a result of the existing timber becoming damaged and rotting, Unfortunately, we don't have any photographs or drawings which demonstrate what was there before, so it's quite difficult to do any sort of comparison. States that the heights of the decking have not been altered from what was previously or existing. Again, without information to corroborate that, it's quite difficult. Although the objection from neighbour would suggest that there is a degree of change. Highlights also that there are a number of examples in the local area or neighbouring properties in which similar works have been completed, and points to both neighbouring properties having decking installed at the same level, with the works currently before us having been carried out to be in keeping with the levels of neighbours' decking. In terms of consultations, sorry, I'll come back to that slide. The Maastricht, Shedixley and Summerhill Community Council provided no response to the application. There were 3 representations at the time of the application, 2 objections and 1 expressing support. Letter in support didn't provide any additional detail or reasoning for that. The objections mentioned the raised deck invading the privacy of number 25 Birkhall Place, that's the immediately adjoining neighbour, allowing the neighbours to be able to see directly into the neighbour's living space, and also that the raised decking would result in a loss of privacy to the garden of 163 Cairnwell Drive. On submission of the review, those who've previously commented are invited to make any additional comments at the time of the review, and this next slide included a photograph which was provided by a neighbour at number 25. They indicated that they would be satisfied with the decking being decreased by a metre away from their living room window. I'm not entirely sure if that's referring to its height or its distance off the boundary, and also that the lower area of decking should be taken away from the boundary fence to which it's affixed. I think that's on the basis of the boundary fence being erected by number 25, so that's more of a sort of property dispute rather than a relevant planning consideration on that front. A photo has been enclosed, which is just what we're looking at here, so back to that if needs be. So at that point, convener, I think it's just for members to decide if they feel a site visit would be necessary in this case.
Okay. Before we go to a site visit, I don't know if you'll be able to get any aerial views. Would you on the Google map, Gavin?
Yeah, I can certainly try.
That'll see if it can satisfy before we go to deciding whether we need to actually.
Yeah, I'll leave that one up just for a second while I tootle around.
Yeah, because I know that we can get in a bit closer if we use Google Maps or whatever it's called.
Yeah. Excuse me. Okay, I'll just close off this screen and share my other one.
Okay, thanks, Gavin.
There we go. Hopefully that's up shortly.
Don't know if we can get any. Yeah.
So disregard the little red dot that's hovering there. The application property is actually this one.
Okay.
If you can see my cursor there.
I don't know if that's. I don't know if that gives you much value, to be honest. Just because we can't come and say, oh, excellent.
Yeah, you can zoom in a little bit further, but it doesn't get any clearer, unfortunately. Just gets grainy.
Okay. Right. All right, thanks, Gavin. Members, you'll have heard the applicant requested that we did do a site visit. Members, do you feel that that would be necessary, or do you feel that the information in front of you, assisted with that picture that we just got from Mr. Evans, will give you sufficient evidence to be able to proceed? Dell, Councillor Hendrickson.
Yeah, I'm fine that we can go ahead. I think I've got all the information that I need.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reynolds?
Yes, I think we've got all the information. The photographs that you've actually provided are very, very good, and it gives us a proper impression of what the back garden is like. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm equally satisfied that I have information, sufficient information, should I say, to go ahead with the determination today. So if I could just hand back to yourself, Mr. Evans, to go through the relevant policies and other considerations.
Thank you, Convener. Yep, I'll just share my screen again here. Okay, so yes, in terms of policy considerations, first and foremost, policy D1 relates to design quality and requires that development be of a high standard of design, which demonstrates an understanding of its context. Also sets out that proposals will be assessed against these following 6 essential qualities listed here. As I've mentioned on other occasions with the LRB, some of these are perhaps more relevant to, residential layouts and things like that rather than domestic additions. So and just bear that in mind. In terms of zoning, the application site is within a larger area that's zoned as an H1 residential area, and sets out, and policy H1, sets out a number of criteria that new development should satisfy in such areas. First and foremost, is this overdevelopment of a given plot? The officer's report concluded that whilst much of the rear garden would be developed in some form by this proposal, it is nevertheless still available for use as an outdoor amenity space. So it's not like a great big extension just occupying the whole footprint. And on that basis, considered that the proposal wouldn't represent overdevelopment of a plot. It's obviously open for members to come to their own view on that. Secondly, would it have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the area? Again, the officer's report in terms of character mentioned that the proposal takes place to the rear of the property and is largely screened from view from public areas. So in that sense, the wider impact would not be so great, but did note that such decking doesn't appear to be a common feature of nearby rear gardens, and the unauthorised one immediately next door notwithstanding. In terms of amenity, the officer's report identified an impact at the immediate neighbours at numbers 25 and 29. As well as properties, the closest properties on Cairnwell Drive and Upper Maastricht Way, albeit to a lesser extent, and refers to a loss of privacy due to the elevated height and the absence of screening, or the reduced effectiveness of screening, as well as the relationship with the living room window at number 25, which if I just scroll back, you can get a sense of from the photographs. So this is the living room window. Number 25 just there, and I think the concern is that when sitting on this deck, the upstand here, or when using the deck, isn't sufficient to provide privacy to looking back into that window at quite close proximity.
What's the distance of the space, sorry, Gavin, between the fence, the upright, and the, if you like, the neighbouring fence? Because remember there was the gap. There's
a small gap. I believe it's 0.6 meters, so 60 centimeters, length of 2 normal rulers, really. So not a lot in it.
Okay, thank you.
So going back to policy H1 and its tests. Next up is, would the proposal result in a loss of open space? This is a private residential curtilage, so there's no public open space affected. And lastly, would it comply with relevant supplementary guidance to the development plan? We'll just turn to that one next. The relevant guidance in this case is the Householder Development Guide. So the Householder Development Guide firstly sets out a series of general principles that all domestic alterations and extensions and the like should adhere to. These state as follows. Proposals should be architecturally compatible with an original house and the surrounding area in terms of their design, scale, etc. So there's a matter of judgment there on how sympathetic you feel this is in design terms. Should not dominate or overwhelm the original property, which should remain visually take precedence visually. Again, this is located to the rear, not visible from the street frontage, so its wider impacts perhaps not so significant. proposal should not result in a situation where the amenity of neighbouring properties would be adversely affected. So, for example, in terms of privacy, loss of daylight, or general amenity impact. Again, a matter of judgment involved there, but this appears to have been central to the appointed officer's decision, the impact on amenity arising from overlooking of neighbouring gardens. The elevation of the deck has the effect of reducing the intended effect of boundary fences and the like, and offering clear views over and into neighbouring gardens and indeed towards windows of one property in particular. Approvals predating this guidance do not represent a precedent. The applicant has cited the decking at neighbouring properties without giving a sort of exhaustive list of the ones they mean. But certainly ACC has no record of permission being sought or indeed approved at the two adjoining properties. If decking has been there for an uninterrupted period of more than 4 years without enforcement action being initiated, then it would be lawful in planning terms, and it has the effect of being like you had planning permission. The footprint of the dwelling as extended should not exceed twice that of the original house. In this case, there's no extension to the footprint of the house proposed. Lastly, no more than 50% of the front or rear curtilage shall be covered by development. So again, not really increasing the footprint of the house itself, and the deck is simply an alternative to a soft landscaped garden, sort of akin to a patio, really. In terms of decking specifically, the Householder Guide does state that proposals should not result in an adverse impact upon the amenity of adjacent dwellings, including both internal accommodation and outdoor private amenity space. In relation to fences and boundary enclosures that you might find around areas of decking, in all instances, the scale and form of boundary enclosures should be appropriate to their context and should not detract from the street scene as a result of inappropriate visual impact. And also, proposals for boundary enclosures will not be permitted where they would result in an unacceptable impact on the amenity of neighbouring dwellings. So the thorny issue with decking sometimes is that the obvious thing to do to address issues of privacy or overlooking from a deck might be to put a big fence or some sort of screen around the edges of it, but bearing in mind the change in levels, that can lead to a situation where the neighbouring property is looking at a fence that's sort of double the height of a normal fence from their ground level. So need to be quite cautious about that as a potential solution. So just sort of summing up points really. First and foremost, zoning. Do members feel that the proposal complies with the test set out by policy H1 for residential areas? In design terms, is the proposal of sufficient design quality, having regard to factors such as scale, siting, proportions, materials, and colour? And would it comply with the general principles set out in the Householder Development Guide, as well as its specific comments on decking? So really, just once you've considered those points, do you feel that the proposal as a whole complies with the development plan when sort of read in the round? And are there any other material considerations or factors that outweigh the development plan in this particular case and point towards approval? I'm happy to assist with phrasing of decisions, or if members consider conditions are necessary. And I'll hand back to you there, convener. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Gavin. Gavin, could I just, before I go into questions, could I just get you to take some of the photographs back up of kind of the back of the houses and the wider footprint of other houses?
Yeah, sure. Just go back to the start and run through them if you like.
Yeah, please. So can I just ask, so number 27 is obviously the one we're looking at. So 25, is that on the right or the left? Is that my right or your
thing I should know off the top of my head? To the right hand side as we're looking at it.
Okay. And is it correct that both neighbours have raised decking? Is that?
Well, the applicant submission referred to raised decking at both adjoining properties, but from the photographs I couldn't see anything at number 25.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that's just a reference to. Oh, sorry, going the wrong way.
Because I could see some sort of white bits there that seem to be.
Yeah. Well, My
here.
understanding is that this would just be the stairs where the back door comes out, and then you would immediately come down. So I'm not sure if there's anything further within the garden that we can't see too well. The neighbour on that side did provide a photo with their additional comments, so I'm not sure if that helps. I mean,
All right.
I'm not sure that.
Okay. Could I see the wider kind of area, just photograph would be helpful as well.
Yeah, of course. So something like that one.
Yeah, there's not one that gives me a little bit more view of the other houses on the other side.
Yeah, these two are sort of in both directions.
Can I see the aerial one again, please?
There we go.
Okay. Just have a look. Just a quick glance. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Questions for Mr. Evans? Dale, you?
Yes. Sorry, you've changed the photographs on me. I was looking at the one on page 81. With regards to the area, I know the area reasonably well, and looking at the roof lines of the houses on both sides that go down from the house, it's on quite a slope.
Mm-hmm.
So would the impact of the decking being at that height have an additional impact on particularly the house that you're looking across there, the one I was about to point on it on my screen, which was pointless. So it exasperates the height of the deck that we've actually got and increases the intrusion.
Yes, I think that's a fair point, Councillor Henriksen, because the properties, if we go back to here, because the properties fronting onto Birkhall Place here are on the higher ground, it means they're already in a position where there's perhaps a degree of looking out over the properties to the south, and this decking does seem to exacerbate that.
Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Henriksen?
I'm thinking at the moment.
All right, okay. I'll take in Councillor Reynolds while you're thinking. Councillor Reynolds, have you got any questions?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, just I suppose a general question. This is a retrospective planning application, and Kevin, you mentioned the 4-year rule. So I'm assuming that this decking went in less than 4 years ago. Would that be correct?
Yes, I believe so. I think it was brought to our attention as a result of a complaint, and then the applicant was invited to make an application. That's usually the first step in sort of following up on complaints of unauthorised work, is to invite an application to be made, and then once a decision's been made by the appointed officer and gone through any appeal route, then the planning authority has the option to consider whether further formal action is warranted.
Okay, and you mentioned the two neighbours on either side are concerned about the privacy, etc., being able to look into their windows. You also mentioned that the only real way around that is to extend the fencing, which would, do away with natural light going in next door as well. Is one other option actually to put opaque glass or perspex on top of the existing fence? So at least there's natural light coming through, rather than putting a solid structure like extending the fence itself.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Something like opaque glass would have the effect of providing some screening, but allow for natural light still to penetrate. You would still have the issue of the increased height when seen from the other side of the boundary, which I guess would be most likely number 25 here. So they'd be looking at a 1.6 metre high fence that's already there, and then whatever additional height is required from deck level. So potentially, for argument's sake, double that. So 3.2 meters worth of enclosure of some sort, which you could view as being oppressive.
Can I just ask a question around the fact that they've stepped it back by just over half a metre, we reckon, which could allow for some plant, tall sort of shrubs to be put in that location, because that's the one it's adjacent to, isn't it? I'm just wondering how kind of, I mean, I know the suggestion is that they feel that the privacy of their back window is compromised, but I'm not quite sure I'm going to follow that logic, given that they've got blinds, curtains, and it's got probably about a metre between, maybe a bit more than around a metre roughly between the two. And you'd have to really strain to be able to look into that property. Now, again, going back a few years ago, a lot of certainly the layouts of back gardens by the council was kind of the mesh low level fencing, so that there was shared gardens. Excuse me a moment. I just inhaled, sorry, a seed that had it was in my mouth. Excuse me. Yeah, so you know, I suppose what we look at in terms of privacy now. I think I've stopped choking to death there. Yeah, it was actually never a consideration in the past. It was always about, you know, speaking to your neighbours rather than blocking them off. So, you know, I know that's why I'd asked for the aerial, because I know that I've been around one or two bits around Summerhill and things where it has been just that low level fencing grid, kind of council fencing that they had between back gardens, so that people actually engaged across their gate. So I'm just trying to think, that's why I asked to see the aerial, to see how much of that still existed in that particular envelope of houses. Adele, you were asking a question.
Sorry about that. It's getting the microphone switched on. I've actually got a couple of questions now. I noticed on page, it's very clear on page 81, and I noticed it on the page that you're on at the moment. Is that actually a small patio door that leads out onto it?
Yes, it certainly looks to be, Councillor Henriksen, yeah.
Yeah, yes. And the other issue that I have is that it's not only the closeness of the window of number 25 with regards to people looking in. Would noise from people sat on that patio be an intrusion as well, regarded as an intrusion?
It potentially could be, yeah. I think the likelihood is that with decking and furniture sat there at an elevated position closer to the window than they otherwise would have been, it makes that particular part of the garden somewhere that people are likely to linger and spend time and have conversations and things, whereas that may not have been the case previously. And as I said, it's quite difficult for us to know exactly what the arrangement was before without photos or plans, but yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Mm-hmm. That's everything.
Okay. So, sorry, Gavin. So those doors, I'm just wondering if, because given that they're a complete change to what was there before, it was obviously a window before, just looking along. I would have assumed they would have had to have some sort of planning, building warrant or something to do that, wouldn't they? I'm just thinking, because if we took,
No, for a dwelling house like this, the permitted development rights that apply would allow you to do that without permission.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking that obviously if we don't give them permission and take enforcement to remove the decking, I'm just thinking of the hazard of you're gonna have patio doors that open out into a drop, how that would sit. And I know that that's not just about, you know, the only consideration what to think.
I think building regulations might well capture that, because at the moment, obviously, that, you know, French doors are opening onto a level surface.
Yeah.
Whereas if the deck had to be removed, for argument's sake, they would just open onto open space and you drop. So some sort of enclosure or sort of, you know, Juliet balcony type thing might be necessary.
Okay.
Sorry, I've got another question that sort of leads on for that. It's on page 82, the balcony on the other side.
Sorry, Councillor Henriksen, I don't actually have the agenda open. Can you tell me what page I'm on at the moment in this presentation?
I'm not sure. I can't see it. I can't see the number.
If I can,
I think
you
it's
just
one.
tell me when I hit 82.
I think it's going back actually from where you.
Yeah, I think you're now.
Yeah,
Next one.
next one. I think.
Next one.
The other way. I think. I'm getting. Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there is a slightly better one with a pile of gnomes in the corner. That helps.
Oh,
That
Oh,
one's-
yeah, it
that's
is.
the one.
Councillors.
Oh, which one are you, John?
The littlest one.
Sorry, Henderson.
Yeah, no, it looks as if the width of that patio is hung off the width of the one that we're looking from, with steps going down. I do actually have a suggestion that would satisfy me when we come to make a decision.
Are you talking the width as opposed to the length of the house, the decking?
Yeah, I'm looking at the width of the one next door.
So is that the distance that is projecting out from the rear face of the building?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. It's certainly.
It's a bit L-shaped. This one, I think.
Yeah.
Next one.
Yeah. There's stairs going down.
So
you come out and go down the stairs. And
sorry, I don't understand what you mean, Councillor Hendrickson, because it's hard up against the house, so there's not. I don't think there's steps coming out of the house.
No, but don't. You see the table on the other one. When you come along the balustrade, there's a gap, and you can actually see the balustrade going down. So the stairs are adjacent to the proposed.
Yeah, I think it's as you were saying, Maria. It's like an L shape.
Yeah.
At the end of the L shape, you've got the stairs going down away from this property.
Yeah, so it's pointing towards the if you like, the houses on the back of the picture. Yeah.
Yeah. I looking at it, I think, bearing in mind that we've got the patio doors, I think possibly, I don't know if it would be possible to approve. Well, am I talking in the right time now, or do we have to?
No, it's okay. I mean, I think what you have to remember is we've got to deal with the application that's before us. We can't say, well, cut this bit off and stick this bit on, that we're happy with that. We have to determine what's before us.
Oh, okay.
Just if that helps.
Yes,
I know it gets quite confusing because it's easy to try and find,
solutions. Yes, yeah.
But unless it's something that's a simple that can be addressed through a condition, it's not about remodeling.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm still learning.
No, it's okay. I've been doing it for 15 years, and there's a lot still to learn.
Right.
Is there any further questions for Mr. Evans?
Just one, if I may, Mary. Again, following on what Del's highlighted here with the decking next door, the objection coming from that particular neighbour, are they concerned about the privacy side, or is it just the neighbour on the opposite side that's concerned about the privacy?
I'm not sure I have a sort of breakdown of which comments came from which property, but if you could give me just a second, I should be able to get that up, Councillor Reynolds.
Because the concern that I would have there is that if they're complaining about the privacy, it looks as if the decking's roughly the same sort of height, and I couldn't see a point that's worth taking into consideration, whereas I would take it into consideration on the other side.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I think the complaint about the relationship with windows was principally coming from the other side at number 25, but I'll just double check.
Yeah, that I can understand.
Okay, so we didn't actually have an objection from that side, Councillor Reynolds.
Right, okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
So the 25 didn't object.
25 did, 27 didn't.
All
So
right.
we're looking at 27 just on this slide.
Okay.
So the application house is 25, is that? No.
Sorry, no. Sorry, I've got my numbers confused there. 25 objected and 29 didn't. 27 is the application site. Sorry, my mistake.
Yeah. Okay. Are any more questions from Mr. Evans? No.
What I suppose a general one, if I may, and it's just picking up on a point that you raised there, that we can put conditions in, but we can't rejig the whole thing. And this comes back to the point that I raised about maybe having some opaque glass in. Now, is that a rejig or is that a condition?
That's a tricky question, really. With these things, it's always what's called a matter of fact and degree. And the question is whether you're sort of significantly altering the proposal. Generally speaking, with boundary enclosures and screening, that's usually within the scope of something we might condition. So I think you'd be on fairly solid ground there.
Okay.
And equally on that same question, would it be feasible to have some sort of landscaping solution in there, given they've left that space?
Yes, yeah, I think that's absolutely within reasonable scope of what you might do with conditions, Councillor Bolton.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, members, any more questions for Gavin?
Yep.
Okay, so in accordance with the procedure note, we will now obviously decide if we're in a position to proceed to make a decision. Councillor Reynolds, are you feel capable?
Yes.
I'm having a disco light with my computer. Just a moment. I don't know what's going on. I'm flashing like mad. I don't know what's going on. No, give me 1 second, just so I can see if I can do something here. Okay, I'll just have to put up with the disco. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Hendrickson, are you in a position to determine as well?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay, right. If I could perhaps ask, I mean, I'm quite happy to go, but does anybody want to speak first? I'm not seeing any volunteers, so I'll go first.
Ladies first.
Sorry?
Ladies first.
Thanks, John. I mean, this is quite a difficult application to determine because, you know, if you look at the fact that it's got the French doors, you know, the suggestion there was decking there before, however, we haven't got any evidence of that. But what we can see is the next door neighbour at 29 as, from looking at it, decking at the same height. I think, you know, we've heard already that the bottom part of the garden is not part of our determination today. That's already within permitted development rights. I do think that the applicant has tried to appease the number 25 by putting that about half a metre, just over half a metre of distance between a barrier, if you like, and their living room window. And I do think it would be quite difficult to be able to see in. However, I do accept the point that I think it was Councillor Reynolds made about it's not just about the visual intrusion, but it could also be about the noise. So, you know, that there's a number of factors that make me slightly nervous, but I do wonder by reducing, because I think there was a suggestion if we reduced it a metre that would make it somehow better. My understanding is noise actually rises, so I'm not quite sure that it would make much of a difference to number 25. You know, clearly, as I say, I mean, if we could have put, I would like something more like a heavy shrub to be put in that space, not necessarily one that was more dense as opposed to sort of leggy, because again, what we don't want to do is take away or intrude into number 25 space. But I think, you know, some sort of hedge, box hedge or something, quite a high one, that would be at the same level as the screen that they've currently got, which would just act as a sound buffer more than a, you know, a visual intrusion. I don't think that would actually detract from the light into the neighbouring property. You know, so I'll be interested to see what other members have to say before I kind of finally come to my decision. Councillor Hendrickson, do you want to go next?
Yes, I'm in a mind to refuse. I think the main issue for me is at number 25, and it's the proximity of the decking to the window. Not only do I feel that to ask someone to have curtains and blinds to prevent people looking into the living room, I think is unreasonable.
Sorry, Councillor Hendrickson, just to say, I didn't ask them. They've already got them from the picture. I wasn't suggesting that be a part of a condition.
No. But it's the measures that they have to take themselves to prevent people looking in. I'm also concerned not only about the noise from the fact that the decking is large enough for a seating area. I think even just having being aware of the presence of people that close to your window it could be it's breaking their privacy. I wouldn't say go as far as to say that it would be intimidating, but I think if I was sitting in that living room and people were sitting out on that balcony, you would be aware of it, and it would be an invasion of privacy. Also looking at the other properties, there's a lot of invasion of other people's privacy on not only on number 25. It's, hold on, I'll just go back to the, ooh, I've gone too far, the map, so I can, on, yes, on Kenwell Drive. I think they're looking into the gardens, especially as it is raised up quite high and it's on sloping ground. I just think I would be minded to refuse it on the privacy aspect of the surrounding properties, for not only for people looking into the windows, but the noise and the fact that they're going to be constantly aware of people sat outside their living room. Whereas I find that if it had been at a normal garden level, the intrusive effect of someone at ground level isn't as much as someone being right outside your window. That's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah, usually Councillor Hendrickson and I agree on most things, but I don't necessarily agree in this particular case, I'm afraid. The point that you raised regarding having vegetation between 25 and 27, I think would certainly stifle noise. The concern that I would have there being, if I was the resident in 25, I would be concerned about the overgrowing vegetation. And again, they would have to cut it from 8 or 9 feet lower, which I think would hinder things there. Certainly, if we could introduce a condition regarding opaque glass to maybe a height of 1/2 metre, I think would probably cover from a privacy point of view. That I would prefer to go along with. If we can't do that, then yes, I would probably agree with Councillor Hendrickson. But that's down to advice from Gavin. If that would be a way forward as far as having that opaque glass.
Gavin, can you maybe give some comfort to Councillor Reynolds about the appropriateness of that suggestion?
Yes, I think introducing some opaque screen of some sort along the top edge to just increase that height slightly without, fundamentally taking away light. That's something I think we could do via planning condition in this case. Okay,
that would be fine. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Councillor Hendrickson, but I think if you look at the layout of the back gardens, everybody is cheek to jowl, and I think that people use their back garden. Some will use it in a more reflective way. Some will use it as a party zone. I completely appreciate that, and I don't think the decking necessarily. And if you look at if you look at number 29, and actually the impact on one of their windows, and they're not actually objecting, and it's far closer, because I was a bit concerned about that to start with. But because there was no objection from them, you know, I obviously let that drop. And I think that, again, if you look at, they've got and I recognise it because they've got like a little potting station there with stuff to do. So they obviously take a pride in looking after their property. And the suggestion to me is not so much about it being like a bit of a party zone. I think it's more about just actually using the garden. Not sure about the artificial grass, but they've obviously got young children who find that more conducive to their lifestyle. I feel that we've got those patio doors there, so there's going to have to be some sort of provision to be able to accommodate. Yes, we can stick in a Juliet balcony, but you know, I don't think, given that the next door neighbour, number 29, has a terrace, I'd like to call it, whatever you want to call it, already established. It would have been really helpful if the applicant themselves could have actually produced pictures of when it, as they're saying, it was previously a decked area of sorts, which again, because we don't know when the windows or the doors went in, would have actually aligned with what they were claiming. Because I think by the looks of them, they have been there a little while. I just don't think it's reasonable for us to refuse it, when I think, you know, Councillor Reynolds is provided a suggestion in terms of a perspex screen, which would then not detract from the light. It would be opaque, so they would have a level of privacy. I think that actually would give me the comfort that I'm looking for, because I do think that people are going to use their gardens, and I don't think that decked area would add to a nuisance or an impact on other people's amenity, because I think you can, you know, everybody can see each other because you're right next door. Most of them are detached. Well, I think all are semi-detached properties. So I think they're used to that kind of, that almost like, it feels like almost one large communal garden, the way they're all adjacent to each other at the back. And I go back to the point, I think previously in the council's past, it was very much about having open gardens to the neighbours so that you felt as a bigger community. Now, unfortunately, we prefer to put up barriers of high fences and high shrubs, you know, so you lose an element of that. We've got 2 objections, and I think number 25 did indicate that if we could decrease by a metre away from their living room window. Now, I don't think, and suggesting that lowering the deck, with the decking being decreased by a metre away from our window. Now, I think they've moved it already. They couldn't really move it any further over because it's right hard up against their patio doors. So I think they've moved it as far as they can. And if that screen is in place, the lower of the deck being taken away from the boundary fence, I'm not quite sure what they're saying to that. Can you explain that, Gavin?
I think that's to do with the construction of the lower part of the deck, involving it being directly affixed to the boundary fence. So that's not necessarily a planning matter for us to get involved in. That's more just who owns what and a bit of a sort of civil dispute. So
yeah, that's why I thought I just wanted to double check. So I think the fact that they have moved it away as far as they can away from that window, we have got a compromise, which I think Councillor Reynolds suggested, and they may well end up putting shrubs in there as well, because we can't say they can't put a potted plant in there. I think it would make it look a little bit nicer as well. So I think there could be a solution, and the fact that they've actually suggested a way forward, I think shows that they're not trying to be completely unreasonable, and I think that the applicant has tried to meet them as best as they can. So for those reasons, you know, if you look at quality placemaking, I think if you look at what they've done in their garden, they've obviously put a lot of effort in to make it look nice and to make it somewhere they want to spend time for themselves and their family. Yes, we've got to in H1 You know, we'll have to obviously consider the character and the amenity of the area. You know, but if you look at amongst all the gardens, they've all got different elements, from sheds to swings to, you know, and depending on whether you've got kids, you know, having next door neighbour that's got kids might be an intrusion. You know, so there's lots of different elements of gardens that we have to take in. And I know we're looking at this one application. If you look at the supplementary guidance, the household or development guide, does it dominate or overwhelm? Well, again, that's, I think, as Gavin said, a bit of a judgment call for us. Yes, there is a level of impact on the overlooking, but I think that because of the high fences and just the whole nature of the layout of the back gardens, I think, you know, you could look into everybody's garden if you just looked out your window. Because, you know, and again, Councillor Hendrickson, you made reference to the fact that it is slightly higher up. So they already have that overlooking of their property. So I think just on balance, with that condition, I'd be happy to overturn the officer's recommendation and move that it be approved with the condition as suggested by Councillor Reynolds. Councillor Reynolds?
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. I suppose the type of material will be really important as well, Gavin. Probably have to be tempered glass out there.
Yes, I think it would have to be, and there's probably some sort of building regulation that would cover the type of glass that would be used, because it would need to be sort of pretty robust and stand up to stand up to ill treatment.
Everything.
So, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, so are you happy, Councillor Reynolds? Sorry, you're saying, yeah.
Well, yes, quite happy if we can put that in as the condition and then approve.
Okay, Councillor Hendrickson.
I'm happy to go along with the officer's recommendations. I appreciate everything that's been said. I do find it quite intrusive to number 25. For me, looking at, again, I don't know if I can continue talking. Looking at the picture that I'm looking at, it looks as if they've got a barbecue set up there. So it's purely intended for social gatherings. And I would, yeah, I would just, if I was next door to that, I would feel quite intimidated. The earlier I was talking about the width of it. And we can't do anything about that because the one to number 29 is half the width. So you're not going to get the amount of people congregating on that side. That would be slightly, that would be very much less intimidating and less intrusive. I just find that this is an incredibly intrusive piece of decking that impacts not only 25 but all of the buildings round about it, and I would be going with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Hendrickson. As I say, it's a difficult application to determine, but Ms McBain, could you just do a verbal vote, given there's a decision? Thanks.
Okay, so if members could just indicate if they wish to approve the application or refuse. So convener.
Approve with the condition.
Councillor Hendrickson.
Refuse.
Thank you. And Councillor Reynolds.
Again, approved with the condition.
Okay, so the application will be approved by majority with the one condition in regards to an opaque screen.
Yeah, thank you. Gavin, you'll just finalise that wording.
Yes, I'll circulate something for agreement. So just to be clear, members, there was no requirement for additional landscaping to accompany that. Is it just the opaque screen?
I mean, I'm quite happy to put in some landscaping there because I think it would soften it. But I'm looking at Councillor Reynolds because I think he had a slight concern about some landscaping.
Yeah, you're talking about that 60 centimetre.
Yeah.
If you're going to have the opaque glass on top of the fence, then you could have your landscaping between the fence and
So shall we put, are you happy to put a condition on Councillor Reynolds, which, I mean, I just felt it would act as a buffer in terms of sound, yeah. So again, it would be appropriate landscaping, Gavin, perhaps, you know, it could be, because again, I'm thinking something like, you know, a dense box hedge or something that gives a little bit of a buffer as opposed to some willy-o thing that would end up having huge implications in terms of, you know, causing light displacement because it grew too big.
Yeah, you wouldn't want, for example, a Leylandii that's going to grow wildly out of control. I think that was part of your concern, Councillor Reynolds.
Yeah. So perhaps again, if we could maybe then put in a condition, then you could come back to us with appropriate suggestions.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll perhaps use a single condition that just covers both things. Now I'll put it round members for agreement before decision goes out. That's
great. Thanks, Gavin. Okay, I think that's us finished today. Thank you both for attending both LRBs. I only had to do the one. And appreciate that, you know, none of these decisions we make are particularly easy, but I think it's done in good faith and with the support of Gavin and obviously Lindsay and Lisa. So thank you all for today, and I'll see you tomorrow, Gavin, and maybe you, Lindsay, yeah?